How to Impress. Souverän und selbstbewusst auftreten im Leben und auf deiner Businessbühne. Hier bekommst du Tipps und Tricks rund um das Thema Wirkung, Auftritt, Stimme, Kamera und die Businessbühne. Ich bin Sonja Gründemann, die Expertin für deinen erfolgreichen Auftritt und berichte dir aus der Praxis für die Praxis. Immer nach meinem Motto: Perfekt muss nicht sein, echt ist schöner.
I think a lot of us as speakers, me included, I've been guilty of this before. We get so focused on what we want to teach and everything we know and telling them as much as we can in that short amount of time that we don't realize it starts to become overwhelming for them and that people can't wade through all that data.
German Speakers Association. Interviews, Wissen, Hacks. Für Speaker, Trainer, für alle, die es wissen wollen. GSA.
Hello, everybody. There's another podcast that I'm recording with a great person. I met her in the States at the NSA-Convention, and I was deeply impressed by how she's doing storytelling, because maybe you know storytelling is one of my favorite things. I love it. And she's not loving it. She's doing it in perfection. She is not only a storyteller, she's also a comedy person, and she's having an academy where you can learn the storytelling as well. And at the NSA convention, she really jumped into stories and changed it spontaneously on stage. That was very impressive. And I would like to talk about that with her in person. And I'm so glad and happy that she took the time to be with me today. A big applause for Kelly Swanson. Woo!
Thank you, Sonia. It is so great to be here. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, not this year, but this is the next best thing. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Because I asked you when I was in America and it was too short term, so to say. I mean, the NSA convention was, it's been almost 2 months ago. So planning a trip to Europe is not a thing that you can do within some weeks. So I totally understand. And I was more than happy that you agreed being on the podcast with me. So thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
I'm just jumping directly in because you said one thing at the NSA convention. You were on the main stage and you did an impressive job there. I would like to talk about that with you a little bit later. But you also said one thing, and this is so important for me in storytelling. There is a difference between motivation and manipulation. Could you say something about that? Because I love that sentence.
Sure. And I always often say as well, there is a difference between telling people what to do and making them want to do it. And as speakers and thought leaders and whatever role we play, we want to get up there and give them this information that we have. But if all we do is just give them a data dump, if all we do is just put the information in front of them, that doesn't persuade them to take action on it. It doesn't tap into their pain and their desire and their emotions attached. You don't get a buy-in from your audience. And that's what I meant by that statement. And I think a lot of us as speakers, me included, I've been guilty of this before. We get so focused on what we want to teach and everything we know and telling them as much as we can in that short amount of time that we don't realize it starts to become overwhelming for them and that people can't wade through all that data and they may not care about what you care about. And that's why I love story, because story, well, it does a lot of different things, but it allows you to wrap your data in a way that is persuasive, that is emotionally engaging, in a way that pure information alone cannot really do.
That's so true. But when I come back to what you just said, does it mean that I have to focus on less content rather than on too much content?
No, I don't believe so. Now, in some cases, I have had speeches where I've said to myself, Kelly, you are trying to teach them too much in 45. So there may be some cases where it's just too much for the audience to absorb, especially if it's in a keynote where the expectation is less. But it doesn't mean you have to give up content. It doesn't mean content's bad, story's good. It's just that story illustrates your content. It puts a human face on the talking point that you want to make. And therefore it shows instead of tells.
That's such an important message, because I think people are always struggling, or very often struggling, about the storytelling point. And I just had someone here who said, I can't find the story. And I said, but you have all the stories around you. And he said, no. And I said, yes. And then we were looking for the stories. Do you know these points where people are coming and saying, well, I just have facts, I don't have story? What are you doing with these people?
Yes, that happens all the time. It happens quite frequently because we are experts on our topic. I mean, that is what we're there to transfer the information, but we're also there to create an experience for our audience. Otherwise, we weren't needed to begin with. They could have bought the book or looked it up on the internet. I mean, saying some things that maybe they couldn't find, but it's all about the experience that you create. But quite often I hear people say, I don't know where my stories are. I have a presentation. It's all data. I don't even know where to begin. And it is overwhelming for speakers, because then they go look at somebody, who is more entertainment in nature, or they think they need to have a story like that. Or we need to find the best story, and really what I try to tell these people is stop looking for the best story. Look for the right story that does what you need it to do. If you have a speech with talking points or content, whatever you call, let's just say you have, 10 lessons in your speech, or 4, and you need stories. The first question I'll say, let's say, for example, I'm talking to a financial planner, which is, I don't know if y'all call them the same thing, but somebody who helps someone manage their money. So I'll say to them, and they've got a lot of content about saving money and retirement, blah. And so I'll say, well, okay, what's one piece of advice you're giving your audience? And they'll say that they need to save money now and not wait till later. And I said, okay, is there an example you've seen in the real world out there of somebody who did not do what you thought they should do, and it paid off really big? I mean, it had a negative impact. Oh, yeah, there's a story there. Yeah. What about somebody who did what you said you should do, and it paid off? Oh, yes, there's a story there. So go through if you don't have any stories and you don't know where to find them, go through your talking points. And then ask yourself, where in real life did I see an example of this? Did it happen to me? Did it happen to one of my clients? And a lot of us, if we're selling more on the back end than just the speech, then it serves us well to have stories about the people we've helped who have used our method. And I call them customer testimonial stories that you can put into your speech just to illustrate how this worked for somebody else. And that's the quickest way to find stories. I also believe that it serves us well for everyone to have speakers to have a why story somewhere at the beginning of your speech. And that is a story, many ways to get there, but a story that says, here's what I do and why it matters to me personally, to the people I serve, and to the world. A story that explains why you got into this, why it was so important, why most of us can say we struggled with this ourselves. And that's why we went through this pain, and there's a valuable story there that because, and here's why we do that. Because just as in sales, and I'm sure it's true no matter where you live, selling is emotional. People buy for emotional reasons. They buy from people they like, trust, believe, and feel like they know. And so data can't do that for you. It can't make them know you. It can't make them trust you. It's numbers, it's content, it's information, but a story can. So a simple story about your child or your husband or a silly TV show you watch, it lowers their arms and it creates a sense of likability and trust. And so there's another reason for that why story in the beginning is so they can get to know you a little bit. And now you're not just a talking head. You're a human being to them, and they've made some sort of a connection with you.
Yeah, and what was really good to see, thank you for explaining that, and what was really good to see at the NSA convention was you had two people on stage with two stories on the main stage, talking about the workshop a little bit later. And there was a woman and a man, and I can totally remember the whole story of the woman because I was so touched by it already when she told it, when we watched the video, how she did it. And I can remember everything she was talking about because she had a great story that was very touching. It was not a humorous story because I would love to talk about comedy later on with you. And then there was this man, and I remember that you also turned his story in a great story, but it didn't touch me so much, so deeply. And this was a nice experience, again, to see that not every story is for everybody, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And what I loved about that session is we chose 2 award-winning stories.
Yeah.
We didn't take stories that were weren't completed yet. And what I wanted to show you in the audience was not this story's bad and it should be better. That was not the point. And I hope I related effectively. The point was, let me show you all the choices you have.
Yeah, right.
Inside of a story. We tend to, in the speaking business, just really make it black and white or just too simple when stories are these beautiful, well, we could do this. I call them layers. There are many layers you can add in. You can seed for more business. You can be touching. You can be funny. So what I loved about theirs was they were already great stories.
Yeah,
I just showed you different choices that can be made in a story. I hope I also illustrated that a story told in 10 minutes could be told just as effectively in 5. That was one of the big lessons I also wanted to teach was because a lot of times people can say, I don't have time for a story.
Yeah.
That long of a story. And I just wanted to show you that you can do things like that in minutes. And you're right. Their styles are different. She's going to be very touching and the nature of the story itself. His story was different. And I think it also showed you that there are just many different types of stories and there's no right or wrong in what kind of story you should tell. So thank you for pointing that out. I thought it was a fun presentation to be part of.
It was so great. And what you just said about the layers was also very impressive because you used music later on and you used different styles. And that was so good to see because as you just said, the stories that they were telling in the videos were already great stories and they were touching and they were touching in every way, being sad or being emotionally deeply touched, like her homeless story, or even the story of the man who told it, but you changed it and you used music and you used, although it was shorter, you used a lot of pauses where you were really pointing out the things. And that was so impressive. And you just said one thing, it can be humorous, it can be touching, etc. You are coming from the comedy. Also, you're doing comedy. You have a program. I just thought, Who Hijacked My Fairy Tale, which is very funny. Do you think comedy can help us finding good stories or telling good stories?
Yes. And I believe that audiences love humor. They love to smile. They love to have fun. And I've heard it said over the course of my career, do we need to be funny? Yes, if you want to get paid. Well, that's not very fair because not everybody can do it. And I don't believe you should just go hire somebody to give you a bunch of jokes. That's not going to work out well for you. And the first thing I tell, so to answer your question, humor is invaluable. I just believe when I can get people laughing because it's an experience and they remember having laughed and joy, and it's such a great thing. And it's so hard for people to do. I've studied it and still I'm not sure how to do it. I don't know how to teach it. I don't know. I know when I see it, but it's very difficult. And well, that's why I like stories and that's why I like our business, because I'm not in a comedy club. I don't have to, every joke doesn't have to be the fun. I don't care if anybody laughs. I'm just having a good time up there. I'll also tell people if you're listening and you humor is something you want, but it's just very hard for you. Don't focus on being funny. Focus on being fun. Fun out. Where's the fun already in your personality? Because if they laugh and if they have fun, you're still creating that same kind of energy and that same feeling. But yes, I love to use humor. And sometimes it's just a little line here and there. One thing, Sonia, that I don't know, I've learned, and I'm sure you have as well, being a fan of storytelling, is the tiniest thing you do can make the biggest difference in how it's received by the audience. One thing also I want to say about music. Some people hate that. I was told forever, don't put music behind it. That's tacky. It's campy. It's whatever. But I wanted to show you that we have these things at our disposal, props, lighting, sound, where we stand, what we do, how we act it out, that can give it so much more life. And some people did not like the music. Some people loved it. And I don't care. Because it's not about the right way or the wrong way. It is what style works for you, and own that. And somebody's going to do it one way and another person's going to do it another way. And that's totally okay. I think we need to stop. I don't know if you do this where you are, but in the United States, it seems like we do a lot of comparing and stating these rules that really shouldn't exist. It's maybe we feel threatened that if somebody does it a different way, then somebody will be walking. Some people will have a script and they will follow it. And some people will not, and they'll walk through the audience talking, and there is room for both. So what I was hoping in this conversation and that you saw at our convention was there are many ways, they're just choices that you're going to make.
Yeah, that's so great that you're saying this, because I totally agree with you. And I think it's so important to point this out again and again and again. There's no pattern in which you can put everybody, because everybody is different. And it was so great to see when we went to the workshop, because you also did a workshop and you put people spontaneous on stage. And I remember the fireman, the burn man, and his story was already so touching as well. And you put in so much things. And also, although his story, and that was so impressive as well, because his story itself was hard. I mean, it was about being burned as a child. But you find that I get goosebumps when I'm talking about how you did that, because you also made some humor in this heavy story itself, because you told him, how was the voice of your grandma? And I mean, if he's changing his voice to his grandma's voice, everyone's going to smile, even smiling, if not laughing. And this is so great to see, to put all the emotions in one speech. It doesn't have to be hard. It can be humorous as well. And everyone tells this story in another way. So this is so important, I think.
Yes, and I still remember him as well. And it was already touching. It was already an amazing story. And he just told us about it. I mean, he did kind of present it, but you know what I mean. He didn't know it to come up there until he was up there.
Yeah, right.
And what was so we can learn from that moment is that it's those details. Often when often I'll say people will stand outside of a story and they'll tell that story from a safe distance. And I'll tell them, no, I need you to go stand inside it. And I need you to look around, and I need you to tell me what you see and what you smell and what you hear. And and just like in a movie, if there's a character in here, I can't see her, show her to me. Let me hear his mother. I mean, it was so funny that his mother would come from the parking lot and pray for grandmother, I can't remember, and pray for everybody along the way. I mean, and I think even in a story like that, humor is a good thing because it's such a heavy, we're sad, we're heavy. And we didn't make the subject funny. We didn't make it funny that he was going through that. We brought, and real life has humor in those moments. Sometimes when somebody has a story about they're in a crash or they're, whatever. And they're like, and I'm lying there and I don't know if I'm going to live or die. And I'm like, yes. And did anything funny go through your mind? And, oh yeah, I don't have on clean underwear, or who's going to go feed my cat, or, oh, my mother's going to have something to say. I mean, we have these narratives running through our head. And if you're looking for humor, that is one of the best ways to add it to a story is tell us what you're thinking in your head, because you can make up anything. What's going through your mind. I say your inner narrative. That's a great way to add humor to your story, is add little sarcastic comments. It's almost like taking a commercial break from your story.
Yeah, that's
to talk
great.
about what if that makes it.
Yeah, that's great. And you also said, you mentioned it a little bit, the deeper I went, the more the people connected. Don't tell me about the character, let me know how they feel. And this includes what you were just saying. And I think, and do you think that people are sometimes not brave enough to allow themselves to go that deep in the story because they think, oh, it's maybe not important that people know that?
Correct. They think, or they're afraid to, because you have to get vulnerable. Some of these stories are really hard to tell. And people say, oh my gosh, I cried when you had me tell the story that way. I said, yes, because I didn't let you tell it from a safe distance. I made you stand in it and feel it. And I always say, and it's somebody else said it first, I can't remember who, don't tell a story you're not through bleeding from yet. You don't have to be over it, but you need to be okay enough so that your audience knows you're okay. Some people think a business setting isn't the place for a personal story. I disagree. I think we've heard enough stories about other companies. I think when you tell a story about your marriage, everybody can relate to it. I think you can deeper, as long as the story makes the point you need to make, as long as it has a purpose, unless you're just a humorist and you don't really need much of a purpose. But it needs a purpose for being there, and it needs to be structurally sound. When you said the emotion was the connector, when people tell stories, the brain of your audience lights up. It's doing all kinds of things that your data couldn't do. And when you tell me about something that happened to you, the plot of your story, I'm listening, and I may be engaged and whatnot. But when you tell me how it felt to have this problem, the emotions that you were going through. Somebody said we only have a certain number of core emotions. When my brain hears the emotion, that's when it looks for a time when I felt that way. And so emotion is where we connect in the story, not plot. And so it's important to remember, when you tell me a story about something about you or about somebody else, don't just tell me the problem and I believe, unless it's humorous, just comedy, that stories are about people who have a conflict and it's resolved. There's a conflict and there's a resolution to it. Somebody wants something, somebody wants to get away from something. So that's the structure that I seek in a story. So when you tell me what happens to you in your story, just don't forget to tell me how that made you feel, to have the problem, to have it solved, to live into a normal. because those emotions are where we really, really tap in on a deep level. And you don't have to all do it the same way. A man might explain his emotions very quickly, or even a woman.
Yeah. Also, sometimes,
or somebody in Germany. Y'all might be a little bit. I mean, people have different personalities. Here, we're all like, blah, we let it all out. Here, y'all might be more reserved. In which case, you would not reveal as much of that. So you do it in your own style, your own personality style.
Yeah, that's so important. And I just wanted to ask you a personal question, because are you coming originally from the comedy and came then into the speaker business to do the storytelling? No, I see you're nodding your head.
I never wanted to be in the comedy world. I don't want to be a stand-up comic. I don't want to do comedy clubs. I'm very clean. It's not always appropriate, but that never appealed to me.
Yeah,
I was always a storyteller from being a kid and having a town and characters and even as a child, it was always about telling the story. I would take comedy classes and improv classes, and my theater show is marketed as a comedy show with a lot of heart. But people come see it and they're like, Kelly, that's not real, just a comedy show. Yes, you laugh all the way through it, but if I can't love on people and share really raw, vulnerable stories that change the world, then I'm not, that's what I want to do. So that's that's how it started for me, was as a storyteller. And then it evolved into being a speaker, because I met a speaker named Jeannie Robertson 20 years ago who said, you're going to have a hard time making a living telling stories. But you can if you come over to the speaking business. So be a speaker, wrap up what you do differently, and you can sell it over here. And she was right. And I have to say, to this day, even knowing everything I do about story, it's telling the stories that get me business and get me more business. I don't know. That's what they love about what I do. And I do it to a degree many people will not do it. I mean, that doesn't mean you have to do it my way. I'm the weird one over here, and I'm fine.
No, I don't think, I totally understand you. So for me, you are not weird at all. So let's just talk about your program, because I think this is also very interesting. Who hijacked my fairy tale? How did you come to that? I mean, what's in it? What are you doing there? So that is such a funny title already.
Isn't that I'm telling you, a good title, you can ride the wave of a good title for many years.
Yeah.
But it was my book. It was the title of my book. And it began because I was a motivational speaker first. I wasn't speaking about story. I was speaking motivational speaker. And I would talk about how we buy into a fairy tale. An idea that life is supposed to go a certain way, that we need to look a certain way. We need to marry a certain type of person. We need to have a certain kind of house and get views and likes on, and so I was that was my messaging was you don't have to be what the world says. So the fairy tale was a great analogy for me, because here we grew up reading these fairy tales that told us what we should be. And many of us believed it, and it's created a lot of pain throughout our lives. So that's where the title came from. I don't remember, it just popped into my head one day, who hijacked my fairy tale? And it was, people love running with that theme. There is really good content under there, because I look at what fairy tales taught us, that the good guy always wins. The bad guy always loses. That, somebody else is the wicked witch, not us. I mean, there's so many fallacies, or it's a myth. It's a myth that we try to live by, and therefore we're never happy. So there's where that came. And then when it turned into a theater show, people don't realize the theater show is what I was doing in my keynotes for years. And an agent reached out to me and said, would you put together a theater show? I think she wanted another Jeannie Robertson. and a comedian. And I said, I'm not a comedian. No, I will not do that. But if you let me do what I'm already doing. See, I was already coming into the speaking business, doing interesting, weird, different things, like talking to myself in a mirror on stage, or adding music, or, I was always the storyteller in the speaking business. So it was theater show just kind of morphed into that, more of that with less speech.
For me, it's very sympathetic. So sympathetic, I think this is the right word. So, do you think there's a way do you maybe have a tip, because we are already coming slowly to an end? I can't imagine that, but time is running up. So is there a tip that you can give speakers to be more brave on stage and to, for example, talk into mirrors or use music? Because always when I go to conferences, not especially talking about the GSA or the NSA-Convention, but conferences for other people who are maybe in the B2B business as well, or we have also a lot of trainers and coaches that are joining us at the convention. So do you have a tip how they can be more brave on stage?
Well, one tip I would say is your audience is not expecting you to be perfect. Your perfection will be in your imperfection. I do believe authenticity is the new. So I want people to release this idea that they have to be perfect, that every word has to be perfect, that they have to be something. Because when we start to go see the speakers at the top and we look at them and we go, oh my gosh, they're just talking. They're just real people talking. So I would say, in order to be brave, reframe how the pressure you're putting on yourself. Have fun. For me, I'm doing something very, very, very brave right now in my speaking business. And I don't know if it'll pay off. But what was happening was I always knew how I wanted to do it. Look around at all the other speakers and they weren't doing things that way. So I said, this must be wrong. I'm not going to do it then. And I turned myself into a commercial copy of everybody else. And then, I still did different stuff, but I was hiding the one way I really wanted to do this. And then COVID hit.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, life is short. I'm not getting any younger. I just had this, time's running out. I don't want to retire and never have tried this the way I really wanted to do it. And another thing I thought was, I'll turn around now. In our industry, I believe, at least in the United States, people are starting to take more risks on stage. They are raising the bar now. These younger people are coming in there, and our competitors are changing the face of how they're getting more creative, and it's not your old school way of speaking anymore. But I don't know if this resonates with you and the people.
Totally.
But I would somebody, Sonia, as I was going along doing it the way I thought I should. Yeah. And we have to pay the bills. We have to make money. We can't be so weird that they don't buy us. But I then turned and saw somebody doing it their own way, in a deliciously weird way. And I was jealous because I thought, well, how can they have the freedom to dance up there the way they want to do it? And I'm over here not. I don't want to get to the end of my life or my career and realize I could have done it this way all along. I think too often we think and we train each other that there is one way to get business and one way to do it. And this is, if you use notes, you're not a speaker. Well, that's ridiculous. But we do these things and people buy into that and they say, okay. And our audience, it's like music, in my opinion. We don't want one song. We don't want one artist. We want the beautiful flavor of all the artistry that we have. To say who's the best, when people say, who's the best speaker? I'm like, what a dumb question.
Totally.
That's folly. That's like saying, who is the best band? Who is the best? going to agree because the world is big enough for all these artists. You can be the river dancer, you can be the classical, you can be Celine Dion. And I believe in our business. That's a message we need to hear, is that you choose the artist you're going to be in this world. Now, maybe you might make some choices that need to be tweaked because it's keeping you from getting booked a little bit. Mm-hmm. But it's more important to choose it and own it and start selling it than to get on that hamster wheel of, right. Should I be this? Should I be that? So I just say the world is big enough for all kinds of music. And I think our audiences, even corporate, the business audiences can handle something different too. I think they're craving it.
That resonates a lot with me. Thank you very much, Kelly. That was such an honor to have you in this podcast. And I'm so sad that we've done. And there was so many points where I just was like, yes, totally. I totally agree with you. Thank you very much for these beautiful insights. Thank you very much for these beautiful tips that you gave us. And I hope that we see each other once again. It was such a great pleasure having you here. Thank you for taking your time. And you said something about the imperfection. And my personal slogan, my company slogan is, don't try to be perfect, be real. And that was so great that you were just talking about that. I got goosebumps again. So thank you for being with me in this podcast. And I hope to see you again one day.
Same. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope maybe I can come back one day and we can keep talking, or even better, that I can get out there to meet you. So happy speaking, everybody, and storytelling.
Yeah, thank you very much. And for everybody who liked this podcast, and I'm sure everybody did, just follow Kelly on LinkedIn or wherever you find her. She's got a webpage. She's also got an academy where you can learn storytelling. So thanks a lot again and bye-bye.
Die GSA-Convention.
Rock the Stage. Der Vielfalt eine Bühne geben.
Ich hoffe, die heutige Folge hat dir gefallen und du schaltest auch beim nächsten Mal wieder ein, wenn es heißt How to Impress, souverän und selbstbewusst auftreten. Hinterlass mir gern eine Bewertung bei iTunes oder auch eine Rezension bei Google und vernetze dich mit mir auf den sozialen Medien, vor allen Dingen bei LinkedIn und Instagram bin ich aktiv. Über Weiterempfehlungen freue ich mich natürlich auch sehr und wenn du noch mehr über mich erfahren möchtest, dann abonniere einfach meinen Newsletter. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Tschüss.